Wrap up your day and say what's really on your mind. From holding politicians to account to cutting through the doublespeak. Get it out in the open now. Live from our studios in the Byward Market, this is CFRA's Nick at Night.
All right. Welcome back. In studio, I have with me Tom Harris of the International Climate Science Coalition. Tom, it is a pleasure to have you back. Now, the course of our discussion this evening is we have been invited by our most loving, most caring, most knowing, most all-seeing, and most wise provincial government to give them some input on pricing carbon. Kathleen Wynne, as stated, cares so much about our opinion, she's going to come to the nation's capital, and she's going to ask you to tell her what she already knows.
Yeah, that's right. On March 11th at the RA Center, 2451 Riverside Drive, near Bank Street, from 6 to 8 p.m., okay, coming up. They want to hear your opinion, okay? So, I mean, if it's only people going there that's saying, oh, my God, we have to stop climate change, then, yeah, that's going to be their input. They promise in their most recent paper, it just came out 2 days ago, called Ontario's Climate Change Discussion Paper 2015, they're saying the whole purpose of this next time period, which goes up to the end of March, is to get public opinion about their climate change plans. Okay, what do we think they should be doing? Now, of course, they lay this out as if the problem is definite, that, there is no doubt at all. And I'll just read you a couple of quotes from the minister's message. This is Minister Glenn Murray, Minister of the Environment and Climate Change. And he doesn't say it with any conditionals like some scientists believe or it's thought. He says, quote, the planet's on track to warm by 4 degrees this century, okay? He says, climate change is a problem with a solution. And, of course, his solution is reducing our carbon emissions. Okay, they use this term carbon emissions throughout the whole document, which, of course, is a complete misnomer because we're talking about carbon dioxide, which, as you know, is invisible, it's odorless, it's plant food, it's not pollution, it's not carbon. Carbon is things like soot.
Right.
Okay? I mean,
or diamonds.
That's right. Anyway, he says the low carbon economy will help us avoid an environmental crisis. Oh, my goodness. So what they're basically doing is they've written this document, and I'll just read you a quote from the introduction to give you some flavor for it. If governments do not take strong action to reduce global emissions within the next decade. Okay, so it's always within the next decade.
I was going to say, how many times have we heard that?
Yeah, it's like they're all going to invent fusion. Fusion is going to be invented in the next 10 years, and every 10 years they put out the same T-shirt. But anyway, if the governments do not take strong action to reduce global emissions within the next decade, we will see at least a 4-degree rise in global temperatures, which, while appearing to be a small difference, will in reality trigger inevitable damage to the ecology of our planet. Now, this sounds like something out of Lord of the Rings, okay?
No,
I mean, there is no scientist that would say that. I mean, there's always uncertainties and conditionalities. To actually put at least 4 degrees as what will happen, it's just stupid. We don't even know if it's going to warm or cool.
All right. With that, we'll hold Tom right there because I'm sure there's plenty more on the other side of the break when we get back here on the Nick at Night Show. 521-825. We'll be right back.
In the pockets full of sand.
All right. Let's scoot on down the highway.
Can I read you the purpose of this discussion paper?
Yeah, sure.
It says this is the reading from the paper itself. I read it all this afternoon. The purpose of this discussion document is to resume a conversation among the people of Ontario about climate change and the coming leadership role our province can play. Now, of course, the real question is, so we're resuming a conversation with the government? I didn't know we were having one.
Well, that was the first thing that crossed my mind. Does that mean, first of all, A, we had one, and B, it stopped?
That's right, because they're it's funny because they give questions towards the end of the document because they're asking for your input. You can do it online or you can do it in person at the meeting at the RA Center, for example. On our homepage, the very first item, which I put up today, climatescienceinternational.org, is the overview of this plan, the public consultation. You can read the details. I show you how to give input. And by the way, I'm asking people, if you want to share your input with us, we can actually help publicize some of the better inputs. Okay, because I'm sure the government will not publicize the inputs that disagree with them.
Imagine that.
Because it's funny, they say that they've been consulting with us, but then they say, we want your opinion on what? Okay, here's the analogy I want to make. Let's say the government decided in their wisdom that they were going to kill all rabbits in Ontario, okay?
All right.
Okay. Now, so they had a public consultation on the best way to kill rabbits. And they would ask you, should we poison them? Should we trap them, shoot them? What should we do? Okay. They never asked the public if they wanted to kill all rabbits or even if the science made any sense that it was necessary to kill all rabbits. They take that as a given. And that's, in fact, what they do in this document. They say, our vision is clear. Okay. They're not asking you for your advice on their vision. They've got the vision. They're just asking you how to kill rabbits. Okay. They don't want to know if, in fact, it's even necessary. They're saying our vision is clear. We want to establish Ontario as a leader in climate change mitigation. They want to be the best of the best, okay? We're already the best. Actually, we have the greatest climate change supposed influencing plan in North America. That was getting rid of our coal stations, which is, of course, responsible for the bill I just got from Enbridge being another $63 a year, they just told me.
Yep.
That wasn't supposed to happen, you know?
No,
Get
of
rid
course
of
not.
coal. We had so much natural gas. Because, you see, people don't realize in 2003, we got 25% of our electricity from coal. Okay, we had lots of it across Canada. We had ways to burn it that was clean, but the government got rid of that. There's now 0% as of a few months ago, and that's all being replaced with natural gas primarily. So, of course, what do we have? Well, we have less natural gas, so the price of natural gas is going up. So, I mean, the bottom line is Ontario has 5 times the debt per capita of California. Mm-hmm. So why are we worried about the minute effect that we might have on climate, okay? A lot of people say, and in fact, it's interesting, when I was reading the Ontario PC party, they have a petition to the government to not have a carbon tax. And all they do, it's very sad actually, all they do is they talk on and on about how this is too expensive, okay? It's a crappy approach because, you know, they're saying, and then of course, if they push a little farther and you look a little deeper, they're saying, well, it would have no impact, okay, because China's not doing it. Because they asked her, Gina McCarthy with the Environmental Protection Agency, how much will Obama's latest climate change plan, you know, regulating CO2 emissions, which our government's about to follow too, how much would that really affect global climate? Well, she admitted it would be just about nothing, even if the climate models they're using are right. But the Americans want to lead the world and demonstrate to the world a moral commitment to this enormous trouble. Now, that's, of course, one of the reasons why the PC Party of Ontario's arguments don't work. Okay, and I talked to one of their representatives the other day. I say, look, if this were a really serious issue, we should, like in World War II, like the small countries in World War II, we should be joining in to help in a moral effort to save the planet. You can't tell people it's too expensive, we're not going to do it. Okay, we don't want to send any soldiers to die. We're just a little country, Uruguay or whatever, so we're not going to join the Allies. Similarly, Canada cannot really use that argument. It's not a moral argument, because if there truly was a major climate crisis, then we should all pull together, okay? And that's what the government is relying on. They're relying on, in Ontario, they're relying on people not bringing up the fact that humans have, as far as we know, negligible impact on climate on a global basis. As long as that's never brought up, then arguments like, oh, it costs too much, will fall on deaf ears among people who want to, quote, save the planet, okay? So it's a lousy, lousy argument to say it's too expensive, to heck with it, let the planet die. I
think a lot of this is driven by intellectual laziness.
Oh, yeah.
It's far easier to jump on the bandwagon, and even if you want to make an argument that is too expensive, knowing it's not going to go anywhere, you can at least, sleep at night saying, well, I did my best. I just wasn't enough. So, oh, well, if you can't beat them, join them. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, a lot of the associations are doing that. You know, different industrial associations in Ontario are actually saying, yes, this is a great plan, because, of course, they want to see predictability. But it's a little like somebody saying, well, would you rather I shot you or hung you or cut your throat? Shoot me. Well, maybe they should say, don't kill me.
Maybe that would be the right answer. We'll take a break and we'll be back with more with Tom Harris right after this. Okay, 521-8255 is the number. Tom Harris of the International Climate Science Coalition is my guest. We are talking about our all-seeing, all-knowing, all-wise, all-loving, all-caring, all cradle-to-grave, we'll look after you, Premier Kathleen Wynne, has decided that she wants your input. She wants you to tell her how to deal with climate change. So, for the first half hour, we've discussed a bunch of things along that line. Tom, you have the questions and guide for discussion. Share some of that with us. Would you please? I am dying to hear this.
Yeah, well, after spending, 36 pages, because I'm on page 37, telling you how it's such a great crisis, and of course we all know the answers. We can forecast the climate. We're the Wizard of Oz. Then they say, here are the questions that are acting as guidance as to what we want back from the public. You know, he says they're not saying, oh, ask us if there's a real problem. But anyway, should we kill the rabbits? They're saying, no, should we use poison? No, what they say is, what can each of the key sectors, and they list them out, do to contribute to Ontario's 2020 and 2050 targets? Because, of course, by 2050, we have to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 80%.
Never mind the fact that these guys are long 80%. Been gone.
So they're asking for all these things about buildings, about net zero communities, about what impact will it have on the food supply when we do all these things. You know, they're saying, our vision, and they say it point blank, our vision, okay, is to save the climate. and you're going to just tell us how we're going to do it, okay? And they ask these various questions. Now, the real question, of course, they should be asking the public is, do you think that human beings are causing dangerous climate change by our greenhouse gas emissions, in particular our carbon dioxide? Because, of course, that's what it's mostly focused on. They don't want to ask you that. They're assuming that's a given, okay? You got to kill all the rabbits, okay? That's a given, okay? They're simply asking you what are the best ways to do it, okay? And then at the end, they do at least ask you this. They say, this spring, Ontario will, they don't say might based on your input. They're saying Ontario will confirm the market mechanism or mechanisms that will be used to price carbon in Ontario. Oh, isn't that nice?
So in the budget.
Yeah, they've come to their conclusions already before we've given our input that they are going to bring in mechanisms to price, quote, carbon, which is really carbon dioxide. So they say some of the ways that we could do that are ensuring greenhouse gas emissions reduction certainty, supporting and encouraging innovation in industry. We could have cap and trade. We can have carbon taxes, blah, blah, blah. So, you know, they're basically asking you, how do you want me to kill you? And I think that what more and more people should do is say, hey, Minister Murray, okay, back up. You don't know the future of climate change. If you want to be a leader in the science, and they say that all through the document, Ontario has to be a leader in the science, well, do something that virtually nobody's done. That is, bring in scientists like Tim Patterson, Ian Clark, Tad Murty, you know, all the different expert scientists that we could get you for free anytime. Okay, they will come and they'll tell you what they think. Bring in scientists on both sides of the debate, and let the public hear the uncertainty in the field. And then ask the public, do you want to spend how many dollars on this problem, given what these scientists have just said? Because, of course, they're asking for all these plans here. They're saying, you know, reduce carbon emissions, quote unquote, from our transportation sector. But they're not saying at a cost of, you know, $150 a year more in food prices for you. They're not saying that. So what they need to do is ask, first of all, did the public think it's a serious problem that's worth spending our money on? And number two, how much would you spend? And when they've done those kinds of surveys in other countries and across Canada in general, you find typically people aren't going to spend more than $100 a year, which means virtually 99% of their plan is unfundable. Okay? So the plan would stop right there. So really what has to happen, I think, is the public should show up at these events and say, okay, show us the evidence that you feel makes it so certain that you know the future of climate, because we don't think you do. And let us hear from scientists on both sides. Ask us how much we're prepared to pay, and then we'll look at the plan.
Yeah, good luck with that. The part that you mentioned something earlier, by 2050, they want to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by how much?
80%.
Okay, 80.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Not 0.8.
If you assume the absolute basics for living, okay, are maintained, then you can say goodbye to personal cars. That would be gone for sure, okay, to get this kind of target. You can say goodbye to much of our heavy industry. I mean, we're shipping a lot of it to China already. Most of it will be gone. The bottom line is that unless you went heavily nuclear, and of course that would make the enviros go even more ballistic, if you excuse the pun, we basically cannot do it without shutting our society down or exporting 2/3 of our population. That's the other thing we could do. They never talk about the fact that if you want to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, the way they're talking about, you really have to stop all immigration and start to export people.
Where would you export them to?
I don't know.
I thought
Maybe
this was a global problem. You know, if it's a global problem, there really is no place to run, right?
Well, you know what he says at the very beginning of the text of the Environment Registry when they talk about this, okay? It says here, this is the first sentence. It's quite funny. It's actually good comedy. It says, climate change is a defining issue of our time. So I thought, I wonder what other people say is the defining issue of our time. Well, President Obama says increasing inequality between the rich and the poor is the defining issue of our time. Churchill said it was the growth of militant Nazism. Anti-abortion people say the defining issue of our time is
abortion.
Yeah, exactly. Martin Luther King said it was race. So it's a very overused term, first of all. But, there were times when climate change was the defining issue of our time. There was a time thousands of years ago when sea level was rising 10 times faster than today, when we were coming out of the last glacial. Okay. And at that time, climate change was the defining issue of our time. But if you look at the last century, we've had a 0.8 degree. 0.8 degrees. It's gotten warmer in this room by more than that. I don't even feel it. And that's been the defining issue of our time. God, we must have a perfect world if something so trivial is a defining issue of our time.
All right. Let's go talk to Stephen in Centertown. Hello, Stephen.
Oh, I'm delighted to join this conversation.
I'll bet you are.
Because from the outset, here's my statement on the whole situation. You should be worried if climate didn't change.
Actually, that's a very good point.
That's right.
Isn't that what climate does? Okay.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that people don't realize is it's not like we're saying the climate doesn't change or we shouldn't do anything. We should adapt to climate change. And, adaptation to climate change, if you didn't adapt to it in the past, you died. The Greenland colonies, when it got colder, if you look at a very, very sad ending to that colony where they gradually died out until eventually the last ones died. So the part of the discussion paper that talks about adaptation appears on the surface to be sensible, except for one thing. They're only talking about warming. They don't talk about cooling. So here we are in a very cold climate where a 1 or 2 degree temperature drop would, according to Dr. Ball, virtually destroy our wheat crop on the prairies, and our government's worried about warming. This doesn't really make any sense at all. You have a choice. You can either worry about warming that would probably be beneficial for Canada, or you can worry about cooling, which could wipe out our wheat crop. Let's see, which should we focus on? Oh, I guess we'll focus on warming. And that's all they do in this report. So the report is even stupid in the part that, on the surface appears to make sense.
Well, that was very well said.
Bob or Bill, I'm going to stop you there. Appreciate the call.
I'm sure there are hundreds of people in Ottawa who are good speakers who have followed this issue well enough to follow up from me, get up and say, yeah, he had a good point. Why are we charging ahead with this when the science is so uncertain? We were not supposed to have 18 years of no warming, but we did. How can we use those models to forecast a 4-degree rise, Mr. Murray? That's what you're saying, a 4-degree rise in the century based on models that don't work? How can you spend billions on that? So, if we have person after person come to the microphone, they're going to have a hard time shutting us all down unless they simply end the meeting.
That's what they'll do. But the point is, that's exactly what you want them to do. It's, in my opinion, when they say we're talking to people of Ontario about this or that issue, let the interested parties discuss amongst themselves what they think, if it's a problem, A, and B, if they determine that it is, what to do about it.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a great quote I saw on talking about Mr. Matthews here, or Mr. Murray, talking about him wanting to be a leader. Well, the quote I saw on Facebook, which I think is brilliant, is I would rather walk alone than walk with a crowd going the wrong way.
Yeah, it's, he keeps talking on and on about Ontario being a leader, but they're not. They're just following political correctness, and they're following what the UN says. They have quotes from the UN. Why don't they have references to the non-governmental International Panel on Climate Change, copies of which are sitting right at the edge of the studio? They can go to, that's right. Anybody can go to climatechangereconsidered.org, and they can see literally thousands of papers that shed doubt on this whole thing, okay? Why is the government in a document here of about 45 pages, lots of background, lots of discussion, they don't mention that there's any debate in the science at all. Okay, this is definite, man. We're going to have the end of the world if we don't have a plan in Ontario, and they don't say boo about the fact that, the sun seems to be driving the climate and we're going into a cooling period, and that should be a big concern for Canadians. Now, why aren't we planning for cooling? Why aren't we working on developing more
crops?
Yeah, those are low temperature resistant crops. If you prepare for warming and it cools, you're in big trouble. Okay?
Absolutely.
If you prepare for cooling and it warms, well, so what? You adopt farming practices in Arkansas. There is nobody farming north of us. Okay, so that's the criteria for Ontario. What will happen if it gets colder? There's not a word about that in the whole document.
You realize about 60% of Ontario is beyond the reach of agriculture?
Yeah, and it's going to be more that way if, in fact, the cooling comes.
Mm-hmm.
The Russians are saying that we're headed into a cooling period by around 2050, being the coldest in 200 years. Now, I hope they're wrong. I don't think really anybody knows.
Right.
But again, you plan for the dangerous thing. You don't plan for the friendly thing. A little bit of warming, so what? A little bit of cooling, uh-oh. And yet, will they accept even those questions at these hearings? We'll see.
We will, because that's all the time we have, Mr. Harris. It's been a blast having you in studio as always. It's always a treat to talk to somebody who knows what they're talking about. And one of the things I like about you is you're not in your face. You're not shoving it down their throat. You just want to debate.
Oh yeah, that's what
And I have tremendous
science.
respect for
Science is about questioning.
Yep.
So let's question.
All right.
Too many lines there in that face, too many to erase or to disguise. There must be telling lies. All those lines are telling wicked lies.